Okay, so this game is Vampire Prince of the City. It's based on White Wolf's vampire role-playing game. And one thing I noticed right off the bat was the rules are written in the same sort of style and format, maybe a little bit more numbering, but not much, as the vampire rule books and in all their role-playing, really. That may work fine for setting the mood for a role-playing game. Even within the role-playing game, it was tough to reference to find the things you need. In a board game, it is so completely out of place. I don't think you're interested in setting a mood in quite the same way in something like this. It's just not. It's not the goal of the game in the same way as it is in the role-playing game. So the cost for coping with this kind of layout is very, very high, no matter what. But there's no real payoff in a board game. Unless it was completely a mood-based board game. But nothing in the board games, you're not supposed to set up music. It should be a very, very simple game in that case, if it was aiming for that. This is not a trivially simple game, but it's not a difficult game. It's just there are things that I missed because of the font choices, etc., which is a problem. All right, well, let's go into what this is about. The backstory is whoever the prince of this city is has disappeared, died, whatever. And a number of the Primogen are trying to grab for power. Now, none of them really has a power base in the city to begin with, which feels a little unnatural to me, to tell you the truth. Maybe it was a very, very strong prince, whatever. You have 5 different clans, and I have to admit, 2 of them look, initially, I haven't played Vampire or any role-playing game in quite a while, but 2 of them were unfamiliar to me, but then they started to look more and more like ones I was familiar with. So we have the Nosferatu, the Diva, which I've never seen before this, the Ventru, the Gangrel, and the Mechat. When I look at their powers, and they have certain disciplines that they get, obviously I recognize the ones from the 3 clans that I recognize. But then when I look at the Mechat, for example, the 3 disciplines that they have, Auspex, Celerity, and Obfuscate, sound like exactly what the Malkavians had. Now, I vaguely remember these guys coming out in some later book, but I find that kind of surprising. And the Diva look very much like, I don't remember who they were, the artsy-fartsy ones, in a lot of ways. The Celerity, Majesty, which was part of, I don't even remember the names of these things. The only one that doesn't seem right is the Vigor. Anyway, I guess these are indeed new clans then, but because I do remember them vaguely in some book or another that I never owned. But it's kind of, to me, a shame that they didn't just go with the original book and added these. But I'm sure to some players it's an advantage, and it doesn't really affect the game much. The powers are the powers, and they may have been able to balance the game out better with these. You also have blood points, and each character has 6 of these to start with, and that's their limit. Little prestige counters, which indicate your individual prestige. If you do something particularly impressive for the city, you get some of those, but they can be taken away. There's a track on which you keep track of, and for every clan there's a little marker. These are a little harder to read than the regular control markers that you come with. I almost wish that just a control marker went up there. So that's to keep track of your prestige within the city, which is really how much of the city you actually control. And then finally, there's this marker which marks how long this fight for the city can go on without risking the masquerade, etc. Basically, at some point or another, they have to agree who's going to be in charge. So in order to win, it's whoever has the highest prestige combination. So your personal prestige, which are these markers over here, and your city prestige, which is what you control, are added together. And actually the personal prestige can just be added to this chart to give a good visual of who's leading at any one time. And when time runs out, whoever has the most wins. Alright, so how do you actually play the game? Well, over here on these, each player has their own card. It gives a number of things like the sequence of play, information on the different color zones. Not that that's terribly important, but it's helpful, I guess. A list of different resource actions you can take, and I'll go over all this. Different kinds of challenges and the effects. Pretty much this is the whole rules summarized on everybody's little card. And then on your character special abilities, you'll have 3 attributes listed: mental, physical, and social, which are used for challenges. And then 3 disciplines, each of which is spelled out as to its entire effect on the card. So, for the large part, you have everything you need to play sitting right in front of you. The only thing you're missing is maybe what other people's powers are. Yeah, you can grab their card and look. Okay, so let's take a look at the game turn sequence. The first action in the game is the resource sequence, or the resource phase. And you're allowed to take 2 resource actions with your character. Now those resource actions are a number of things to set you up for the turn. One of the more popular or common ones is draw a card. And you get one of these cards. If it's a vampire card, well, basically the deck has regular vampire cards which can go into your hand, and event cards which, as soon as they're revealed at the top of the deck, get flipped over and take effect. They all get shuffled together in one deck. The vampire cards come in a number of different varieties. Largely, though, they're going to be things that you play face up during the resource phase, and then they have their effects when you discard them or tap them or otherwise indicate you're using them. Some of them also have a secondary effect, which if they're still in your hand, you can throw them out, discard them in order to get other effects. But they include things like control of, basically additional advantages from areas. They might include little physical resources like a gun or a suit. Why you wouldn't be able to get these without any effort, I don't know. Those seem pretty weak, actually. They can also include characters that you take on as followers, essentially, probably as ghouls, and they can help you. Mortal characters. They can help you in your, usually in controlling or maybe getting some action on people. Okay. That's the first of the resource actions, and that's the most common. Early in the game, usually people are drawing 2 cards because they, want to understand what they can do. Hunt. You gain 1 vitae, 1 blood. This is important because you lose 1 every turn, as well as whatever you lose to your actions. You can consume one of your retainers. So if you have a face-up retainer in play, you can discard them and get 2 blood for them, which in some cases a retainer may not be terribly useful, and that's a pretty good use for it. Return from torpor. In the event that you've run out of blood, essentially, you leave the map and fall into torpor, and I believe you're out for 1 full turn, and then on the next turn you can take an action to come back, and you only have 1 blood, so you probably want to hunt or something to get another one back. Or, and this one seemed kind of weird to me, but you can rescue another vampire from torpor, and if you do this, you're spending the action to help them. They come back with 1 blood, but you immediately have the right to start feeding them blood or something. But you would anyway if they came back near you. So I don't know how big a deal that is. There's card limits. You're only allowed 3 cards in your hand, and you're only allowed 5 face-up cards in front of you that you've already played. You can discard from either your hand or the face-ups, or you can give them to people. They don't change their status though, so like a face-up card doesn't become a face-down card when you hand it off. Okay, I don't know. So let's go to the next step, which is the movement phase. Each player in turn, starting with the person who has the most total prestige, he's the current regent, will be able to move to any space on the board, and the spaces are these colored hexagons all around. They have a couple of pieces of information on them. First of all, they're color-coded to be in a group with other things kind of like them, and you want to control groups for various reasons. They have a little circle here, which you're going to be able to put your control marker in if you own that region, if you're if you have the power there. And then they have a little prestige value listed to them, and some of them are fairly high. Okay. And let's see what else we got here. Okay, the challenge phase. Alright, after everybody's allowed to move anywhere once, except if they're in torpor. After that comes the challenge phase. Now the challenge phase, each player in turn can announce one challenge. And challenges are kind of weird here because you can even withdraw after you don't like what happens. But basically, there's 3 types of challenge that are listed here. Let's ignore the event challenge right now. There is a mental challenge, a physical challenge, and a social challenge. Now, in each case, what you'll be doing is rolling a die. This is the base value. Rolling a die and adding your attribute value of the correct type to that die and trying to beat your opponent's die roll. But among other things, it's possible for disciplines to jump and affect this, cards to affect this. Other players who are in range of the challenge. In order to make a challenge, you have to be either in the same space or adjacent. Other people in that same range can support one side on the challenge, and they do so by adding their attribute to the pile, the appropriate one. Now, you could say, okay, that's all interesting. What happens if you win a challenge? Well, it depends on the type. If it's a physical challenge, you can steal an equipment card or up to 3 blood. If it's social, you can steal a retainer or up to 2 personal prestige markers. And, if it's mental, you can steal a strategy card. Or steal 1 influence token. What is a strategy card in that case? Is it got to be a face-up, face-down one? Or can it be a face-up one? I'm assuming it has to be face-down, but it's not really clear there. And now we start looking through, and this is what's ugly. No, it has to be actually face up. Interesting. So you can steal any strategy card that they have face up. Okay. That's more powerful than a face down one, I'd say. Alright. There are also event challenges. The event cards, when they come face up, have a set of... Let me see if I have an example. Unfortunately, the rules don't give a good example, and I don't want to completely unshuffle the deck and reveal something. Well, here's what the back looks like. So the front of an event card basically gives an effect on the city. And it's essentially a bad effect. So for example, in one of them, that we had in the last game, every player has to discard, one retainer disappears from the game out of those that are played by players, and it's picked at random. But it also has a challenge type, and it can be the type listed: physical, mental, or social, or it could be territorial. And I'll explain that in a moment. That a player would have to defeat that event with. Now, it also has a number that you have to match. So, for example, if it said a physical challenge with a 15, well, your combined physical challenge ability would have to, along with whatever cards or anything that you throw in, would have to be at least a 15, and then you defeat the challenge. If you defeat the challenge, or if you defeat the event, it goes away. You end up getting personal prestige, these markers, but also anybody who assisted you in that ends up getting personal prestige. Oh, going back to the player challenges. I only played 2-player before, so we didn't see we didn't see anybody intervening in a personal challenge, or for that matter, an event challenge. But intervening defending players, or losing players, intervening losing players lose the same effect as the main player does. So there's a risk to intervening. Is there an advantage to intervening? Only the gratitude in whatever the winning player wants to give you. If the winning player wants to, they can share some of the spoils, but they take those spoils from every one of the loser. Okay, so now here in the events challenges, the spoils is personal prestige, and that goes to the main player who declared the challenge. He gets a larger amount, but everyone else does get some who's involved in the challenge. And this is why, in part, every challenge you can refuse to allow people to work on your side, essentially. There's no real reason in a personal challenge, but in the event challenges, there definitely is. Okay, now we go to the influence phase, and this is how you get your markers on the board around the city. The limitations... The limitations on trying to bid influence. Each player gets a chance to bid influence, again going around the circle, but this never stops until everybody passes. Everybody gets potentially multiple choices. Everything else in the game has been kind of, you take an action, you're done for that action now, and now the next player does. This one, you keep going around until everybody's satisfied or out of counters. So to begin with, each player gets 3 of these tokens, plus, I believe it's 1 per entire color group that they control. And this is why you want color groups, because you get more tokens that way. You might have other things that give you more tokens, cards or whatever, but that's the basics. Okay, in order to bid an influence, you have to meet one of the following requirements in terms of a specific area. You have to be in range, and the range is the same. It's really 1. It's where you're standing or next to you. Then you can bid, or you can bid in any zone of the same color if you already control, i.e. have your token, in a circle of that same color. So, I didn't want to spell things out, but if the red player has 2 tokens sitting in the medical center, he can now bid in any of the green things, no matter where his piece is. At the beginning of the game, nobody has any markers at all, so you can only really influence where you physically are. And that's an interesting dynamic to the game, because as the game goes on, you get more and more places where maybe you can play in, unless people take them away from you. Okay. If you bid influence in that way, other players can contest it. And they're allowed to contest in sort of the same way, adding bids to the area if they have either range or a control of a similar colored area. But also they get the ability to contest with pieces that are already on the board. And actually you get to throw pieces that are already on the board into the bidding. What's really cool about this, and why it's a good idea, is they're not actually risked if they're already on the board. Okay. So every token that you bid gives you a die to roll. And when I played this opposed, I didn't get the. I looked at this little chart and it was perfectly readable and everything, but so unhighlighted that I just read it all as just +1, +1, +1, +4, all the same, all points. No, it's extra dice. So every token you bid is worth a whole die. However, if you already have any tokens in that particular zone, area, whatever, I don't know what they want to call, make up specific words for each thing, in that particular hex, if you already have tokens, they're also each worth a die. But tokens that are in the same color zone and already exist are worth an extra point, just a modifier to those die rolls. And if your own character miniature is in the hex, that's worth +4 points on the dice. Okay. After you roll, whoever gets the highest amount wins the challenge. Now, all tokens that were bid by the winning side go into play in that space, and all tokens bid by the losing side do not. And like other challenges, other players can offer to assist. If they offer to assist either side, their tokens also that they just bid get placed, and they could end up getting the biggest advantage in terms of, say control or whatever, of an area by just assisting in a challenge. I want to look up to see. So I don't think you can prevent somebody from opposing. Player is never forced to accept assistance from another during an influence contest. But here's the thing. I don't see a way that you can stop someone from joining the opposition. You can stop someone from joining your support. I don't think you can stop someone from joining the opposition to your influence, because that would just not work. The highest scoring player in the See, they say if player is never forced to accept assistance from another player during an influence contest. Oh, I think I see. Each player can contest it on their own, or they can work together to contest it. So if you're contesting it on your own, you don't add to other people's, but you can prevent someone else from gaining. Okay, so combining, though, makes it much more likely that your side will succeed. Of course, the person who pays the most in a combination probably gets the biggest advantage. All right, so now, and yeah, I haven't played it opposed, so that doesn't really end up as an issue. Now, once a zone, as soon as any markers that are placed in a zone change, you have to determine who controls the zone at that point. And that is whoever has the most of these influence tokens in that zone. controls it, and they simply move their markers from the from just in the hex to over here, and they modify the city prestige by this value. Now, however many, if you take a zone away from someone, they lose prestige as well. Alright, let's keep going. Unfortunately, I'm like less than coherent because I'm very hungry. I haven't had any food today. Influence phase, declare influence effects. Resolution phase, tally prestige. Yeah. Okay. Everybody counts up their prestige just to make sure it's correct at the end of the turn. Hopefully that won't actually have to happen too often. And then everybody loses a blood point, and this moves down. If this was already on the 0 space, the game is over. And whoever has the highest total prestige wins. Some optional rules, some of which, basically, one of which is to handle the 2-player game, which I played with. One of which is to order the players according to prestige for each turn instead of just going in clockwise order. That's a nice option. I don't think I'll play with it because it's complex to play with alone. And then the other is 10 again, and I'm going to play with this one. When you roll a die, if it's a 10, you can re-roll it, you do re-roll it, and add and get a running total so that there's a chance of rolling very high numbers. That's from Vampire, basically, and from the role-playing games. Alright, I gotta load this up because it's almost out of time, and I don't think I want to come back with more intro.